Hi, Year 12. Long time no see. Hope you're doing well. And I thought it would be a good time to do an EPQ update for you. I had been sending out weekly lessons and updates, and actually I'm getting so little response back that I just thought I need to change tactic a little bit. So I've tried to go a bit easy on the last few weeks. I'm hearing from maybe 5 or 6 of you at the moment. And so I thought, let's just go back to square one. Let's kind of do a little reminder of what EPQ is. A few of you at the start of lockdown were just like, do you know what, I give up. And I said, don't make that decision yet. There's plenty of time. And so I think we're at the time now where it's decision time, where if we go any further without doing anything, there won't be enough time to get it done. But at the time we're at now, we're in a good place. If you haven't done anything, it's still not too late to start doing that work and picking up the EPQ again. I'm hoping that this video is timed well for your academic review day, so that when you've done your all your interviews with your teachers and you've had those conversations, then maybe this is a video that you can watch together with your parents or guardians and talk about EPQ and talk about, is it still something that you want to do? Is it something that's going to be useful for applying for universities or apprenticeships or jobs? And is it something that's realistic to do in the time you have left alongside your other courses? Okay, so I haven't been setting work as strictly as we have with the other courses because this is an optional thing. You don't have to do it. It's on top of everything else that you're doing, and we do know that that's a commitment. And so throughout the year, we expect that people are going to change their mind and decide that they can't do it anymore, and that's absolutely fine. Okay, so I'm going to share a PowerPoint with you today. I don't want this to be too long, but at the same time, I'm kind of just going back through all of the EPQ stuff and letting you know what you have to do next and what the kind of time scale is. Those of you who have been in touch have asked me for deadlines, when work needs to be in and stuff like that. So I've created a timeline that I think is realistic and that fits in with everything that I've already told you this year. And so one of my main messages today is that nothing has really changed. The timescales haven't changed. My information or what I'm asking from you hasn't changed. All of these timescales are roughly what they were always going to be. And actually the lockdown period that we've been in has been timed quite well for EPQ because it's a time where we would have given you a bit of a break for mocks, and we weren't expecting you to do that much EPQ work. The vast majority of the work every year is done during the summer holidays, and we've always said that. We haven't heard anything from the exam board saying that the hand-in will be a different time. They're still saying November, and so we're still going for November, which means we're expecting your projects to be in by the first week in October, so that we have time to mark them and check them and send them off. So I'll go through everything. I'll start the PowerPoint. And please, if you have any questions, just email me and I can give you a phone call. I can do a one-to-one Zoom or Teams call. I'm happy to talk to parents as well. So just let me know if there's anything that you need to know a little bit more about. Okay, so as I've already said, I'm not actually going to share anything new with you today. Most of this PowerPoint is stuff you've already seen before. Most of the deadlines and dates I'm giving you are things I've already told you. Today is just a reminder. So EPQ Catch-up, and I want you to remember that EPQ is an independent course. It is mostly just you deciding what you want your project to be about, how you're going to do it, what the time frame is. You are in charge of your EPQ, and you always have been. It's changeable. So I know that a lot of you in this time have really changed direction in what your project is going to be, and that's fantastic. It's always a little bit fluid, and people change their mind and they change their question halfway through their project, and that actually just shows that you've done really good research because it's changed your direction. And it's all about the journey. And so what I want to highlight to you today is that the fact that you've had to do remote learning, the fact that you've been stuck at home, all of those things, everything that's kind of happened in lockdown can be used to show how you've gained resilience, how you've had to be creative, how you've had to be more independent. All of those things actually might be quite useful when it comes to EPQ. So it's an independent course, it is changeable, and it is all about the journey. So the EPQ is made up of 3 components. The first one is the production log, and that's the thing that you've been completing on Project Q, and then we later print it out. So I'm going to show the production log on Project Q later and let you know what it is that you need to fill in on that. I think when you go on it, it looks quite daunting because it probably looks like a lot of pages that are still blank, and that's okay because actually over half of that production log is filled in September, and it is every year, so that's not changing just because of this year. The production log is actually, I would say it is the most important part of the project, more important than the essay. We mark it first. You get a large chunk of marks in the production log, and it tells us what's been going on behind the scenes, the stuff that actually went into creating your essay or your project. The second part of the EPQ is the project. For the majority of you, that's a 5,000 word essay, but for some of you, it's an artifact with an essay, and the artifact's different for everybody. So some of you are making music, some of you are designing outfits, some of you are creating magazines, making films. All of those sorts of things are artifacts, and for those you also need an essay that is 2,000 words and explains kind of what went into making the project. And finally, the presentation, and we haven't spoken much about that this year so far. The presentation is done when the majority of the other work is complete, and it always happens at the end of September. So the date I've got penciled in at the moment is Monday the 28th of September, and this final term, or these last few weeks of the summer term, is when we start preparing for presentation evening, and most of the taught skills that I would have set for this term would be about that, and I've purposely held off on that because I don't want to freak you out, and there's plenty of time in September to get ready for the presentation. So the production log, the last deadline that I gave you for that was the 1st of May, and that was to complete the planning review. So if I just pause for a second and show you what that looks like. Okay, so this is Project Q, and some of you maybe need a reminder of that, and if you need a reminder of your password, or for some reason you can't log into Project Q, please don't be embarrassed, just email me and say, you know, it's been a while, I've got some updates to make on Project Q, I'm locked out, help me, and I'm happy to do that. And the same with your supervisors. Some of your supervisors get locked out from time to time, absolutely fine, just get them to email me and I can make sure they get back in. So yours might look slightly different because I've got the supervisor element on, but yours should look something like this. So you've got conversations from me. So the last one I sent was 10th of June, 4th of June. So that's when I've been kind of setting your work weekly for your EPQ lessons. And along the top here is the timeline, and we'll come back to that later because that's really important. I've updated that so that you've got all of the dates that you need from now until the hand-in date, because I'm hoping that will help some of you to plan ahead and to see that it is manageable to do in the time. I am going to choose somebody, now I hope they don't mind, to show what the production log looks like. And before we went into lockdown, I'd sort of made sure that everyone had done at least Part B supervisor proposal. So you'd all made a proposal for your EPQ, you've all got your supervisor to sign off on it, and we do have to get Miss Truman to sign off as well, but often she knows what all your projects are and she just fills in that later on, so that's not a problem. And then for the 1st of May I asked you to fill in the planning review, and about half of them at the moment are empty. That's absolutely fine, and I quickly learned that actually it was going to be really hard to do some of this in lockdown. But some of you have managed to fill them in. So let's just have a look at that. So the planning review, like most of the sheets, needs to be completed by you, the candidate, and it records your outline plan once your proposal has been approved. All of your proposals have been approved, and we're just waiting for Ms. Truman to fill out the paperwork, and that's fine. So now that you know your proposal has been approved, what are your next steps? So my next steps in planning, researching and deadlines that I will set myself, what I intend to do, by when, what resources I will use, and how I will implement the recommendations of the centre coordinator where appropriate. So the important thing about that is to actually put plans and dates of what you need to do. A lot of you who have emailed me have asked me, you know, what is my next deadline? What do I need to do? And I can't tell you that because you have to set your own deadlines. That's part of the point of EPQ, that you are managing your own project. But what I did say at the beginning is that I wanted you to mention, and thank you to this person who's done this, I wanted you to mention coronavirus, COVID-19, lockdown, the fact that you can't be in school, that you're doing remote learning, all of those things, because that's really important for showing that objective assessment objective 3, which is all about changes and obstacles that you've had to kind of get over, and you know, unexpected problems arising and how you dealt with those. So the situation that we've all been thrown into is an example of that. And you've all had to figure out new ways of doing things. So I want you to write in that first box everything that you know you needed to do in lockdown to still carry on with your project. And if at this point that's still empty, that's okay. Just go back and think about the start of lockdown, talk about what were the issues in juggling your other courses, making sure that you found time for EPQ, what are the jobs for your project you knew needed to get done. Okay, now this is where a lot of you kind of freak out, because then it says my summary and comments and advice from supervisor, and I know it's really frustrating, and I'm a supervisor myself, and I know probably some of you are waiting for me to get back to you about stuff, but it doesn't mean that you can't move on just because you haven't had that conversation with your supervisor. Okay, so especially because of the situation we're in at the moment, it's okay if we backdate some of those comments. Okay, so if you've really tried and you haven't got hold of your supervisor, just leave that for now. Okay, modifications I've made and changes, obviously you can't do that unless you've heard from your supervisor, but you can write down, oh, you know, I tried doing this thing I planned to do and it didn't work out, and I'm doing this instead. Okay, hopefully though, a lot of you have emailed your supervisor and spoken to them. It is not up to them to fill out this part of the sheet. You need to fill that out as a summary of the comments and advice you've had from them. So even if that's just an email, you could probably copy and paste a lot of that email they've sent to you and put it in that box, and then underneath write down what those changes are. Okay, so that's how you fill out the planning sheet. And really, it shouldn't take more than 10 to 15 minutes. What I'm going to ask you to do next is the mid-project review. Okay, and this is something I'd like in by the end of term. So before you go off on your summer holidays, I want you to have completed this. And like I've said a few times, that is no different to what we would normally do. So normally I would expect this to be done at the end of the summer term. And so we are not behind. We're actually absolutely fine. So mid-project review, is my project following my original plan, and how has my plan developed? This is really important for some of you because some of you have changed your plan or you've changed your title. That needs to be a paragraph there on why you decided to make that change. Outline, you know, what was it that led to you going in a new direction. Okay, and that's fantastic for AO3 for that assessment objective. So what I'm saying is you can actually pick up points, you can pick up marks by saying, you know, that plan wasn't working, so I ditched it and now I'm doing something else. Again, have an email chat with your supervisor, write down their comments there and any changes that they've made. And this bit's really interesting at the bottom. My final title and agreed form of project. So some of you are worried because you what you're doing now is different to what you proposed. That's absolutely fine, because on the mid-project review, you can write down your new project and what form that's going to take and how you're going to achieve it, okay? What I'd like you to put in this, my planned next steps to complete my project, are some plans for what you're going to do over the summer holidays, okay? And we'll come back to that later. So for the production log, that's all I want you to do, okay? The planning review and the mid-project review. Right, back to the PowerPoint. I know this is probably quite a long video. Feel free to pause, skip, come back to it another time, but hopefully all the information that you need is going to be here in this one place. So the last thing I asked you to do in the production log was for the 1st of May. If you haven't, don't panic, you can do it now. You do need to talk to your supervisor to fill in those 2 pages, but that can be through email. If you have an opportunity to do Zoom or Teams chat with them, then that works as well. Any way that they can just give you some comments on what you're doing is fine. Talk about lockdown issues in your production log, okay? Obviously, people marking it, people moderating it will know that you must have been in lockdown as well. So it would be weird not to mention it. And like I said, you can pick up marks by talking about how you managed and how you changed things. And now we need to complete the mid-project review by the end of term. So I'm saying that's the 17th of July because that's the end of enrichment week. And that is also to give you time to talk to your supervisor. So what that means is if you've done nothing in the whole time we've been in lockdown, don't panic. You have 3 weeks until the 17th of July to talk with your supervisor, to do a bit of reading, to go back over your notes, to refocus and think about what is it you want to do in order to achieve your project. One thing I would say about changes that you might want to make is you might decide that before your project was too ambitious, or you might want to decide that the project would have been great and you would have got everything done had you had all those hours in school. But because of being in lockdown, you've decided to change or adapt your product slightly to make it smaller, shorter, less ambitious. That's okay. You're not going to get less marks for creating something different than what you'd already planned. You get more marks for explaining why you did that. Okay, so for example, if you were hoping to design a fashion collection of 15 items, you might decide that actually 5 is going to be enough. And that's okay. You won't lose marks for that. If you were going to record an EP with 4 songs, but actually because you haven't been able to be together in the same room, or you haven't been able to get to a recording studio or whatever you needed, then perhaps it's enough to record 1 song well. And that will be your new project. So please don't be afraid to kind of downsize your project because you won't lose marks for that. What you lose marks for is not explaining all of the stages. Okay, so first part is a production log, second part is your product. And that is really what takes up a lot of your time, especially in the summer holidays. It's hard to talk about this one in general because it's different for all of you. And that was something you decided way back in November when you decided what your title or your topic was going to be. And that's the exciting thing about EPQ, is that it can be really anything that you want it to be. By now, in an ideal world, your research should be complete. This term we would have gone to Bath University Library, we would have been able to access all of their journals and books, and we haven't been able to do that, obviously. So that's something to talk about in your production log, to say, you know, I had hoped to get more academic literature, but unfortunately, due to lockdown, we haven't been able to do that. So you should have done, because you should have already been at this place before we went into lockdown, you should have done a little bit of reading, research, you should have watched some documentaries, listened to podcasts, read magazine articles, journal articles, academic books on your topic. So there's so many different places that you could have researched. And I do hope that you've kind of carried on with some of that research in lockdown. So ideally your research should be complete. That's not to say you can't do any more, but hopefully you've done a little bit that can get you started. And by now, your writing and your making should have started. So if you're designing something or recording something, you should have started to draw some designs or to write some lyrics. If you are writing an essay, you should have started to put the bare bones of that essay together. And our lessons way back in February were all about essay writing. So hopefully you've made a start. Even if you haven't looked at it for 12 weeks, you should have somewhere the structure of your work that you can come back to, because it's not too late now to come back to that. Okay, it's not too late. So the final aspect, the third aspect, is your presentation. And again, I don't want to talk a lot about that because we do most of that in September. So what I've decided for this year is that all our taught skills lessons in September, there'll be 3 or 4 of them, will be preparing you for presentation evening. But I know some of you will want to know what it is. So presentation for your EPQ will be a 10-minute talk by you, with 5 minutes of questions and answers at the end. And the guests, your audience, will be teachers, parents, siblings, friends, and other EPQ students. Those teachers will be the supervisors, so your supervisor will be watching you. So it's really whoever you invite. Everybody else in the EPQ class, but we tend to split it over 4 or 5 different rooms. So usually the audience is no more than 20 people. Okay, timeline. So this is what a lot of you have been asking about. I hope I'm emphasizing this enough. I'm going to keep saying it. You are not that far behind. And that's what I've been saying to those of you saying, you know, I want to drop it, I can't do it, is just give it a little bit of time just to think about, because you are not that far behind, and there is still time to catch up. Nothing has changed in terms of when we're expecting these handed in, when you're going to do the majority of the work, when we're teaching you certain skills. Nothing has changed. The summer holidays is always every year when most people write their essays or do their project. And I said that way back in September. That's always been part of our timeline, that you use your 6 weeks in the summer to do the majority of your writing. In September, you should then come back with an almost finished product, maybe not a polished, perfect product, but an almost finished one. That gives us 4 weeks to work on your presentation skills for celebration evening, but also about kind of presenting your work that you've written. So I can give you a little bit of help then on what your portfolio should look like if you're doing an artifact, or how you should be spacing out your essay. We'll do a little bit of revision over bibliographies and referencing. So September is the time to kind of tidy it all up and to get it ready to hand in. The first week in October is when you hand them in to us as a centre. Okay, so that's our centre deadline. That means that you hand them in to myself and Miss Truman, and then we dish them out to the supervisors. Your supervisors then have 3 weeks to check them, to chase you up if you've left something out, or they need you to do something different, and then to mark them. Once they are marked by your supervisor, they then get moderated by myself and Miss Truman. So we've got 3 weeks then from when you hand them in to when we need to send them off. So what now? What are the urgent things that you need to do if you decide you definitely still want to do EPQ, and maybe you haven't done as much work as you should have? What now? What are your next steps? Firstly, please don't give up. I want you to really think about why you chose to do an EPQ in the first place, because I remember being in a classroom full of like 35, 40 of you, and all of you were so passionate about your ideas. There was something that made you want to do that project. And so I want you to try and remember what that was. If you're feeling a little bit disheartened by it, go back to your original kind of notes from our first few lessons, and really look at that question again that you're working on. Think about, you know, what is it that I'm inspired by, that I feel passionate about? Why do I want to do this project? So please don't give up. There is still time. Having said that, this is the time really where it matters if you're not doing the work. So if you want to do it, make a plan. Okay, the way to do this is to write down the main tasks that you need to do for your project. Again, I can't tell you what those tasks are. Your supervisor can't tell you what those tasks are, because each project is so individual. Set yourself some deadlines for when you need to get certain things done. For some of you, or for a lot of you, if you're doing an essay, it's going to be as simple as, you know, write the introduction, write the first 2,000 words, you know, write up to 4,000 words, give it to people to read, to check. It's going to be like that. But for some of you, it's going to be really technical things. So if you're making an outfit, for example, you want to have all your designs finished by a certain time, and then you need to make sure you've sourced your materials and your fabric. Then you're going to need to give yourself a chunk of time to, I don't know, cut patterns, actually do the sewing, fittings, those sorts of things. So it is going to depend on your project what those deadlines are, but write them down and then give yourself dates of when you want to do them by. Complete the planning review, which is the one you should have done by the 1st of May, and write the mid-project review. You will need to talk to your supervisor in order to do both of those pages. And then start writing and making. And this should be the exciting part. This is what it's all about, okay? So what I would suggest you do is, if you're not sure where to start, just start by writing things down, okay? So it doesn't have to be a really well-written paragraph. It doesn't have to be, you know, referenced or, you know, really well resourced. Just start writing. And then when you read it back, make a note of where the gaps are, okay? So when you read it back, think, oh, it would be really good if I said a bit more about this, but I don't know about this. So I'm going to write that down. And then that is how you target your further research. So when I say your research should be done, doesn't mean you're not going to have to look up anything else, okay? I'm hoping you've all got a starting point, so you can start writing, even if it's just writing down, this is how I feel about this topic, or this is why I'm interested in this topic. Then you see where the gaps are, and then you target your research for what you want to do next. Okay, so the other thing that I really wanted to show you is the timeline on Project Q. Here we go. So it's at the top. It should appear for you as well at the top of your homepage. And then if you press View All, it gives you all the dates. So some of these are, where are we? Yeah, they go back to 2019. So when you had to do your initial ideas, you did that by Christmas. Then you did your project proposal part A. I asked you, yeah, you see, I did ask you to do some writing over half term. And then I said in March to email some of your essay. I don't think many of you did that one. And then in May, I asked you, for the 1st of May, I asked you to do the planning review. But again, don't worry if you didn't. There's time to catch up. Just let me know and your supervisor know where you're at. Right, these are the next steps then. So here we go. Yeah, we're in July pretty much, aren't we? So 10th of July, that is a week Friday. I would like you to have your first draft. And I'm saying it like that because it's a really rough draft, okay? What I mean is you've got 2 weeks from now to just kind of jot down your thoughts, the research you've done so far. A lot of you are at this point already. You've already done some writing. But if you haven't, even if you just give your supervisor a page of notes, please try and get something down in writing for your project by the end of this term. And I'm saying that just so you've given your supervisor then a bit of an idea of where you're going, and they've just got something in front of them to show them you are doing it. The week after then, so at the end of enrichment week, is the mid-project review deadline. And you need to fill in all the boxes, please, on the mid-project review. You do need to talk to your supervisor. And I know, you know, they are really busy. The teachers are really busy as well. So just try and email them and say, look, this is where I'm at, even if it's like, I haven't done any work, but this is what I'm hoping to do next. What do you think? try and get a few comments from them, and then even if you just copy and paste what they say back to you in an email into that box, then that's fine. In September, we can go back and edit this stuff as well, so we can always, you know, make it sound a bit better or fill in stuff. Right, these are really important, okay, and I hope you've got a note, I should have said at the beginning, some paper and a pen to write notes. These are really important. So you are going to give yourself at least three mini deadlines during the summer holidays. Okay, this is really crucial for you planning your summer well. You are going to have to work in the summer. So if you are going on holidays for a week or two, then block that time out. Make sure you give yourself a real rest. But then either side of that, make sure that you are doing some work and that you've given yourself some tasks to do. So I've written there 31st of July. It's scary to see how quickly the summer's going to go now. 31st of July, you will be 2 weeks into your summer holidays. So decide what you need to have achieved by that point. It will be different for all of you, depending on whether you're writing an essay or creating a project. Please remember that for artifacts, you do also need to do the accompanying essay. Don't leave that until right at the end. 14th of August, task 2, you'll be 4 weeks into the summer, so over halfway through. How should your project have moved on by then? At what point should you be at by then? Okay, so just have in your mind, what would you want to have achieved by then? Give yourself that deadline. And task 3, the end of the summer holidays, 28th of August, is going to get here very quickly. Your project needs to be pretty much finished. Don't expect to be able to do much in the first few weeks of school in September. It's going to be really busy, isn't it? All of us will be coming back from a very, very long time off school. You will be going into your final year of A-levels. We are going to have a presentation evening to think about as well. So please don't think you can write 5,000 words in a month with all of that other stuff going on as well. That's not being kind to yourself. Give yourselves these deadlines. I'm a real procrastinator. I think I've said that to you before. I'm quite a last minute person. I need a strict deadline in order to get stuff done. And I need to be accountable as well. So if I know no one's going to check the work, then I'm probably going to keep putting it off. So I would suggest that you decide today what those 3 little deadlines are going to be. You're going to put them in your final box of your mid-project review in your production log. And I would send those to your supervisor as well. And then they can check up on you and say, have you done that? And kind of keep you accountable. 1st of September, first week back, most of your work will happen over the summer holidays, so we'd like you to hand in this kind of second draft as soon as you come back to school, and it should be most of the word count. It doesn't need to be completely perfect and edited, and if you could try and meet with your supervisor in the first few weeks and get feedback, that would be really good, because you need to do a project review. So again, your supervisors are going to be really busy. So if that just needs to be done over email, that's okay. But if you could try and see them and hand something into them those first couple of weeks back in September, that would be great. And then project review is due the 11th of September, so after the first 2 weeks. And that's when you've pretty much done all of the work. And then all of the rest of it is to do with presentation evening. So I'm not going to go through that now, but you can, excuse me, you can go and have a look at that yourself on Project Q. And then it says there, the final hand-in, well, celebration evening we think is going to be 28th of September. Final hand-in is the 5th of October. Okay. So that is not there to freak you out. It's there just to show you partly that you're not behind, because the majority of the work happens summer holidays and September. But to make sure that you are ready for that and prepared for that, you need to make sure that the planning review is done, that you've written a little bit, and that your mid-project review is done before you go on summer holidays. Expect that you're going to have to put in 2 to 3 hours a week, every week on this until you hand it in. again, that hasn't changed. That's been our expectation all along. The expectation from AQA is that you get 30 hours taught skills throughout the year, and we are way over halfway through that, and that you do 90 hours independent work on it. So for this bit, this is kind of a reminder of some stuff, and you might not want to watch this yet because it might not apply to what you're doing now. You might want to skip forward to the timeline, where we talk about the timeline, or pause this and come back to it later. But some of you have been asking for a reminder of what goes into the essay, and this applies to you whether you're writing a 5,000 word essay or a 2,000 word commentary on your artifact. And again, I've shown you this PowerPoint before, but I'm just going to do a little reminder. So for an academic essay that you're writing, you need to include an abstract, an introduction. The main body of work is going to be about your main findings, your methodology, your research. You will come to a conclusion, and then at the end of the essay, you'll have your bibliography. The abstract is sort of like the blurb on the back of a book. It's a standalone, succinct summary of the main report and essay. So it lays out the purpose of the research, the methodology you use, the key findings, and the main conclusion. Okay, so it talks about the whole thing from beginning to end, but in a really succinct way. And the point is that it tells the person who picks up the essay, do I want to read more? What are they going to talk about? What are they going to find out? What's their conclusion? And then it kind of tells them if they want to read the rest of it. It should grab the reader's interest, and it should be short, so it should be about 5% of the total. Okay, the introduction. Some of you have already written the introduction, because I think in half term in February it was one of the homeworks that I set you. It definitely might change, and it might be something you come back to at the end and rewrite. But the introduction should again be about 5% of your total word count. So out of 5,000 words, that's 250. It explains the issue or the problem which triggered the research. And again, that's why it's good to kind of go back to those first few weeks and think, why did I want to do this project in the first place? It allows the reader to know what to expect. And it summarizes the outline and the structure that you're going to follow. So some kind of tips for writing the introduction is don't repeat the title because it's there at the top of the page. They've already read it, but reinforce the point perhaps by paraphrasing it and expanding on it slightly. Set the context for the rest of the work. So I think about this as kind of like an hourglass of an essay. So in the introduction, you start really broad about the whole area that you could look into, and then you narrow it down to what your particular focus is. And explain the need for your work. Talk about what are your aims in your research? Why is it important? What is it that you're going to focus on? Because you're not going to be able to look at everything. So what are the key issues for you in your research and your work? The main body of your essay is going to be a discussion of your findings. So by that we mean all of the things that you've researched that help you to develop your understanding of this topic. So the key here is analysis and evaluation of your findings and an evaluation of your own learning. You are going to do source evaluation, which comes as a kind of separate thing at the end, and you all started a table on that. I think in January we did that one. Your findings should also talk about the detailed background research that you've done, which will show the selection of appropriate sources you've used, and hopefully provide kind of unique perspectives on the development of your findings. So you want a wide range of books, websites, periodicals, journals, interviews, lectures, documentaries, all sorts of things that show your resourcefulness and judgment in selection. And then when you've written all of that, and that, by the way, that discussion of your findings, you can have kind of subheadings and that sort of thing. Most people do that because it's quite a lot of words. So it's good to organize it into kind of different sections. And then finally, you come to your conclusion. And the conclusion summarizes the research, answers the main question, and draws together the main points of your argument. And the best are succinct and punchy. So again, we'd recommend probably less than 5% for a conclusion, but no more than 5%. And some tips for this is that the conclusion should answer the so what question. So no one should get to the end of your essay and go, and so it should answer that so what question. It explains what the big picture is. So a little bit like, you know, how I talked about the hourglass in the introduction, you bring the broad issues narrower. You kind of do the opposite in the conclusion. You say, well, this is the bit that I've looked at, but these are all of the other impacts that it might have. What's the effect, relevance, and importance of your findings? In a conclusion, synthesize, don't summarize. So don't just repeat everything that you've already said. Find the links, find the way to tie it all together. Show how everything that you've said so far is linked and has impact and relevance. Like I said, make the specific issues broader. So what are the kind of global issues? What are the modern day issues? You know, as in your titles have asked you, focus on an age group, or focus on a period of time, or focus on a geographical part of the world. But in the conclusion, you can say, you know, if we had more time, we could look at all of these areas. And give an opinion. Try not to say I too much, because this is an academic piece of writing, but try and make it clear which side of the argument you're on. Make sure the question that you started with your title, make sure it's answered. And then you have the bibliography at the end, and we've done whole lessons on the bibliography that I'll repeat at another time. But that's basically all of your sources, you know, books, online, documentaries, whatever, all on one piece of paper. Or more than that if you've read more, and that allows us to go back to the original sources. It's really important that you don't plagiarize, so you don't take some work that doesn't belong to you and put it in your essay without saying where it came from. I've showed you before these two websites that you can use to help you, and the reason I'm saying this now is because I always say make sure you do that as you go along. Okay, so when you find a bit of research, make sure you write down where it comes from. And then when you use it in your essay, give yourself a little note to make sure that you reference it. A reminder then of what we're aiming for. What are the assessment objectives, and why is this all important? So you get 20% of your marks come from managing your project. And that's why I'm saying it's so important that you yourself manage your project, not me, not your supervisor. Only you can manage it. So that we started that right at the beginning of the year by identifying and planning, but carrying out the project is also a big part of that. Applying a range of skills. A lot of us have learnt new skills during lockdown. So use those, talk about those in your production log. What strategies and methods have you used to achieve your outcomes? 20% comes from your resources. So making sure that you are showing you've used a range of resources and that you've critically selected them. And that's why the source evaluation is important. 40% comes from developing and realizing your project. And this is AO3. So part of that is, you know, if you're writing an essay or you're doing a project, do you actually do what you set out to do? Okay. And again, that's why it's important in your production log to talk about what you are changing, how your aims are changing, so that we make sure that, okay, it's not what they originally set out to do, but it is what they decided to do eventually. And this is where it says there, problem solving, taking decisions critically, and achieving planned outcomes. That's why it's important to talk about the problems that you faced by having to learn remotely in your production log. And then finally, AO4, 20% comes from reviewing. And a lot of this happens at the end. It happens through things like your presentation, and when you finish the project, kind of evaluating yourself on how you did. That was a lot. I talked a lot there. I showed you a lot. Again, it's not anything that I haven't showed you or said to you before. But hopefully now you can see it all in one place. You can come back to it. You can watch it again, pause it, make notes. And if you still have any questions, please email me. The main thing to know is that, like, I'm not mad at anyone who hasn't done any work. I can't chase all of you up. There's so many of you. You're all doing really different things. It is independent. It is a choice to do it. So don't be worried about letting me know you haven't done anything and you're freaking out. But if you really want to do this, then now is the time to kind of get serious, to make some plans and to put them into action. I'm still really excited about your projects and about how passionate you were about them. And I don't want you to lose sight of that. It is really hard work, I know that. To do this on top of other subjects is a real achievement. And I just know, because I've seen it before for the last 8 years, I've gone through this. I know that a lot of you will be worrying. I know that the simple thing, perhaps for a lot of you, is to say, I'm not going to do it anymore. But I also know how worth it is. And I know that at celebration evening, you will be so proud of yourselves for sticking with it. Your parents, your teachers, everyone will be really proud of you for doing it. And you know, when it comes to applying for UCAS and things, you know, I've seen students get reduced offers because of EPQ. So it's worth doing for so many reasons. So please don't give up. Please talk to me, talk to your supervisor. We are not that scary, and we will do everything we can to help you. Okay, take care and hopefully speak to you soon. Bye bye.